In the vast, silent expanse of space, humanity's greatest exploration vessel, the Ecliptica, drifts toward the unknown. Its crew of scientists and engineers are ready to push the boundaries of human curiosity until an unexpected discovery changes everything. An alien orb, pulsing with an eerie glow, materializes from thin air, bringing with it a mystery that no one is prepared for. As the crew scrambles to understand this strange object, they learn it holds the key to a much larger problem. Their ship is in imminent danger. The reactor is failing, and the orbs seem to know more than they should. With no other choice, they allow the orbs to assist. But what price will they pay for this help? As the orbs stabilize the reactor, the crew is left with one chilling question. What do these alien entities want? And what will happen when their true intentions are revealed? The Ecliptica may have been saved, but the journey into the unknown has just begun. The Ecliptica hummed with a steady, metallic resonance, a sound that echoed through its cavernous hallways, reverberating in the vastness of its interior. The ship, a technological marvel, was designed to traverse the deepest reaches of uncharted space. It was unlike anything humanity had ever created before, a sprawling labyrinth of steel and circuitry that stretched across miles of space. Every corner of the vessel seemed to pulse with energy, from the humming consoles to the hydraulic doors that slide open with a soft hiss, punctuating the otherwise still atmosphere. Inside this colossal craft, humanity's most daring and ambitious explorers, scientists, and engineers moved like ants in the grand expanse of the ship. The Ecliptica housed a crew of 312 individuals, each handpicked for their expertise and determination to venture into the unknown. Among them were the finest minds in their respective fields, gathered together on this one vessel to unravel the mysteries of the cosmos. The ship's purpose was clear: to push the boundaries of human curiosity, to explore the stars, and to answer questions that had been lingering in the minds of mankind for centuries. The corridors of the ship were alive with the quiet bustle of activity, yet there was a sense of isolation. The crew members were far from Earth, immersed in the endless darkness of space, surrounded by the vast void of uncharted territory. It was a place where the crew's skills and ingenuity would be tested to their limits, where every action had to be calculated, and where the unknown could be lurking just beyond the next turn. Beneath the sleek exterior and the complex systems that kept the Ecliptica running, there was a quiet solitude. The ship's purpose was not just to explore, but to survive in the harshest conditions known to mankind. The mission was a testament to human ambition, a voyage to the stars. Yet there was always an undercurrent of danger, a knowledge that the crew was treading on untested waters. The systems aboard the ship were advanced, but even they had limitations, and the vastness of space posed challenges no one could predict. The engineering and technology behind the Ecliptica were impressive, with layers upon layers of sophisticated designs built to endure the challenges of deep space travel. From the propulsion systems that allowed the ship to travel faster than light, to the research labs where groundbreaking experiments were conducted, everything was designed with precision. Yet for all the ship's grandeur, it was still a vessel of exploration, with all the risks and uncertainties that came with it. Despite the technological advancements, the Ecliptica was far from a mere machine. It was a living, breathing entity in its own right. The crew, though small in number compared to the immensity of the ship, had to work in unison to maintain the vessel and to ensure that everything functioned as it should. The halls were filled with the sounds of footsteps, the quiet hum of machinery, and the occasional beep of a console. In some ways, the ship was a second home to its crew, but in the vastness of space, home felt distant and fragile. The Ecliptica was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's relentless drive to explore and conquer the unknown. Every part of the vessel, from the control rooms to the storage bays, was carefully designed to support its mission. Yet for all its sophistication, it remained at the mercy of the vast and unpredictable universe that surrounded it. The crew was aware that at any moment, they could encounter something they weren't prepared for, something beyond their understanding. But that was the nature of their journey, venturing into the unknown with the hope of discovery. yet with the constant knowledge that danger might be lurking just around the corner. The sense of all that came with being aboard such a vessel was palpable. For those aboard the Ecliptica, it was both an honor and a responsibility. They were the pioneers, the ones chosen to stand at the forefront of human exploration. Yet, even in the midst of their incredible mission, the reality of space was ever present, unforgiving, vast, and full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Dr. Amelia Grayson stood frozen in the center of her lab, her gaze fixed on the strange object before her. What had once been a routine analysis of soil samples from a nearby asteroid had suddenly turned into something entirely unexpected. The orb before her, a glowing, iridescent sphere, pulsed with an eerie light, its surface shimmering like the oil slicks that formed in puddles under sunlight. The orb, about the size of a large beach ball, was an object that belonged to no known category of science, and yet here it was materializing out of thin air in front of her. There had been no warning, no signal that anything unusual was about to occur. Amelia had spent years in the field as a xenobiologist, studying alien life forms and unknown phenomena. But this was beyond her scope. Her mind raced to make sense of the situation. She couldn't explain how the orb had emerged from the containment unit without any trace of movement or mechanical malfunction. It simply appeared, as if it had always been there, waiting to be discovered. The faint hum emanating from the object made her teeth ache, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. Despite her surprise and growing unease, Amelia couldn't look away from the orb. There was something compelling about it, something that drew her in, beckoning her to unravel its mysteries. It didn't seem dangerous at first glance, but the unfamiliarity of the object made her hesitate. She instinctively knew that this was not a normal scientific anomaly. It was something new, something that had the potential to change everything they knew about life, space, and the unknown reaches of the universe. Carter, she called over her shoulder, trying to keep her voice steady, though the excitement and anxiety mixed in her chest made it difficult. "Can you come over here for a second?" Carter was the ship's chief engineer, and although they often sparred over technical details and jokingly bickered about the ship's operations, Amelia trusted him in situations like this. She needed a second opinion, someone who might see something she had missed or offer a rational perspective on the impossible object before her. Carter, already halfway through a protein bar, looked up at the sound of her voice. He paused for a moment, his curly hair ruffled and looking far from the put-together image one might expect of the ship's top engineer. With a sigh, he ambled toward her, clearly not expecting anything out of the ordinary. "What now? Did one of your samples start screaming again?" he quipped, attempting to lighten the mood. But as his eyes landed on the orb, the joke died in his throat. His casual demeanor faltered, and his steps slowed as he took in the sight of the mysterious object. "What in the—" Carter muttered under his breath, taking several cautious steps toward the orb. His usual bravado was absent, replaced by a look of genuine surprise and confusion. Amelia crossed her arms, watching him closely as he approached the orb with a mixture of awe and suspicion. She knew his next words would be filled with the kind of logical analysis he was known for, but even he couldn't deny the strangeness of what stood before them. The orb had appeared without explanation, and it was doing things that defied any conventional understanding of physics or biology. "Is it alive?" Carter asked, crouching down to inspect it more closely, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might provoke some kind of response. Amelia didn't have an immediate answer. She wasn't even sure what they were dealing with, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, it was not inert. The orb seemed to respond to their presence, reacting to them as though it were aware of them. The shifting colors, the pulsations, it wasn't simply an object. It was something much more complex. "I'm not sure yet," Amelia admitted, the uncertainty in her voice betraying the growing sense of unease within her. "But it's definitely not inert. It's reacting to us, I think." As if to confirm her suspicion, the orb pulsed brighter, its glow shifting more rapidly in response to their proximity. The sight was mesmerizing, but also unsettling. Amelia instinctively took a step back, her eyes never leaving the orb, and Carter mirrored her actions. The atmosphere in the lab grew tense, as if the very air was charged with anticipation. Whatever this orb was, it wasn't just an object. It was something far more than they had ever encountered before. Carter could feel the weight of the situation settling in as he observed the orb. He was the engineer, the practical one. His job was to fix things, not to explain the unexplainable. But this was beyond anything he had ever dealt with. The orb's pulsing glow seemed almost alive, vibrating in rhythm with his heartbeat. He swallowed hard, glancing at Amelia as if hoping she would have some logical explanation, but her expression mirrored his confusion and concern. This wasn't a glitch in the system or a mechanical failure. It was something alien, something far outside the bounds of their training. "Okay, this is something," Carter muttered under his breath, running a hand through his unruly curls. His tone was a mix of disbelief and the kind of dry humor he often used to mask his discomfort in bizarre situations. But this time, even his usual sarcasm couldn't lighten the mood. His eyes remained fixed on the orb as it pulsed brighter, and he could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. There was no mistaking it. The orb was reacting to them, and whatever it wasn't benign. Amelia, still watching the orb intently, crossed her arms, her mind racing. She knew that Carter was trying to cope with the situation in his own way, but she needed to think logically, to assess the potential risks. She wasn't entirely sure what they were dealing with, but one thing was certain: it wasn't just a random anomaly. There was something purposeful about the orb, something that suggested intelligence, or at the very least awareness. She could feel the hum in her chest, the way the low-frequency vibrations seemed to echo through the air, as though the orb were calling out to them. "This isn't normal, Carter," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. "Whatever this is, it's not a random phenomenon. It's reacting to us, and I don't think we're equipped to understand it just yet." She hesitated for a moment, her gaze flickering from the orb to Carter. "I think we need to notify the captain. This is way beyond our pay grade." Carter chuckled nervously, shaking his head. "Oh, absolutely. And what are we going to tell her? Hey, Captain, we found a glowing ball of weirdness in the lab, and it's giving us the stink eye? Yeah, that's going to go well." His voice was dry, but the humor didn't quite reach his eyes. He was still processing the bizarre sight before him. The orb's glow was now intensifying, shifting through a spectrum of colors that made it seem almost sentient, as if it were watching them, waiting for something. Behavior. But they couldn't just ignore it either. "But we need to alert her. If this thing's alive, or even if it's some kind of alien technology, we need to make sure we're not stepping into something dangerous." She shot him a glance. "And you're the engineer. You're supposed to be good at solving problems like this." "Yeah, well, this is a problem of a completely different order," Carter said, his expression serious now. He let out a long breath, then tossed his half-eaten protein bar into the trash chute with a soft clink. "I'm good with mechanical stuff, but alien weirdness? This is way above my pay grade. I think we're in uncharted territory here, Amelia." Amelia sighed, her eyes still locked on the orb. As unsettling as it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't dangerous, at least not yet. The orb hadn't shown any signs of hostility, only curiosity. But that didn't mean they could afford to underestimate it. They had to proceed carefully, but they also couldn't ignore it. "We need to figure out what it wants," she said, her voice firm. "We should at least try to communicate with it. If it's trying to tell us something, we need to listen." The orb pulsed again, its light brighter than before, and Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if the orb was responding to their conversation, acknowledging their presence in a way that sent a ripple of unease through her. She glanced at Carter, who had taken another step back, clearly ready to leave the lab at the first sign of trouble. But there was no turning back now. The situation had escalated beyond their ability to handle it alone. They needed to act, and quickly. The intercom crackled to life with a burst of static, cutting through the tension in the lab. Amelia and Carter exchanged a glance, both startled by the sudden disruption. The voice that emerged from the speakers was distant, fractured, yet oddly melodic, alien, yet somehow familiar. The tone carried a sense of purpose, an unmistakable inquiry that seemed to penetrate the very air around them. Neither Amelia nor Carter could understand the words, but there was no mistaking the intent. The orb had reacted to their presence, and now it seemed to be trying to communicate with them. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had never encountered anything like this before, something so clearly alien, yet so intent on making contact. "It's trying to communicate," she whispered, her voice filled with both awe and trepidation. Her mind raced as she processed the implications. The ship systems had never picked up anything like this, no signals, no language, nothing to indicate that they might encounter something this advanced. It was as if the orb had appeared specifically for them, and now it was speaking, or trying to speak, to them. Carter, standing a few feet away, raised an eyebrow, his usual skepticism on full display. "Great," he deadpanned, though there was a nervous edge to his tone. "Let's just hope it's not asking us to kneel before our new overlord." The comment, meant to lighten the mood, fell flat. Amelia shot him a look that said it all. There was nothing funny about this situation. The gravity of their discovery was starting to sink in, and there was no time for jokes now. If the orb was trying to communicate, it was only the beginning of something far more complex. Before they could dwell on the implications of the alien voice, the orb chirped again. This time, the sound was sharper, more pronounced, almost as if it were demanding their attention. The glow of the orb intensified, bathing the room in a blinding cascade of colors. Amelia raised her hand instinctively to shield her eyes, but the light seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment, she felt as though the entire ship had stopped moving, held in place by the force of the orb's presence. As the light dimmed and the room returned to normal, they both took a step back, eyes still fixed on the orb. It had multiplied. What had once been a single, iridescent sphere was now 3 identical orbs, each humming in perfect unison. The sight was disorienting, and the implications were immediately unsettling. The orbs had somehow replicated themselves, as if anticipating their reactions, or perhaps even mirroring their apprehension. Amelia's stomach twisted in response, and she felt the weight of the situation pressing in on her. "Nope, I'm out," Carter muttered under his breath, backing away from the orbs. He had always been quick to assess the practical side of things, but this was alien, and it was beyond anything he had ever encountered. His eyes flicked to Amelia, a silent plea for her to take control of the situation. But Amelia knew that even with her expertise, this was not something she could easily explain or manage. The orbs were beyond any known scientific classification, and their behavior was not only unpredictable, but potentially dangerous. Amelia, however, wasn't ready to give up. She shot Carter a look, a mixture of determination and frustration. "You're the engineer. You're supposed to be good with problems like this," she said, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. The tension in her voice was clear. This was no time for retreat. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. Whatever the orbs were, they were the key to understanding what was happening to the Ecliptica and possibly even the crew's survival. Before either of them could continue their argument, the intercom crackled again, this time with a more familiar voice. Captain Elena Torres's tone was sharp and authoritative, with just a hint of urgency that sent a chill down Amelia's spine. "Grayson, Vass, report to the bridge immediately. We have a situation." The command was clipped, and there was no mistaking the seriousness in the captain's voice. Amelia exchanged a glance with Carter, and without a word, they both knew they had no choice but to leave the lab. Whatever was happening on the ship, it was bigger than the orbs, and they had no time to waste. The bridge of the Ecliptica was a hive of activity as Amelia and Carter arrived. Officers moved quickly between their stations, their eyes glued to the displays that filled the walls of the command center. A cacophony of beeping and the occasional urgent command echoed throughout the room, and the intensity in the air was palpable. Amelia could feel the tension in her bones as she scanned the room. Everyone was on edge, eyes darting between the myriad screens that displayed various systems across the ship. It was clear that something was wrong. Something big. At the center of the bridge, Captain Elena Torres stood, her sharp features set in a deep frown. She was a woman of few words, but her presence commanded authority. As soon as Amelia and Carter approached, Her piercing gaze locked onto them, her expression hard and serious. Without preamble, she turned to Amelia, her voice cool and professional, but tinged with a sense of urgency. "Care to explain why there's a rapidly expanding energy field enveloping the ship?" she asked, her tone icy. Amelia's stomach dropped. "An energy field?" She glanced at the main display, and her blood ran cold. The screen displayed a shimmering, multicolored field rapidly closing in around the ecliptica. It was like a bubble, growing ever larger, enveloping the ship in a slow, deliberate embrace. Amelia's first instinct was to look back at Carter, but she didn't need to. The look on his face mirrored her own concern. The orb had been acting strangely, and now this energy field, it couldn't be a coincidence. There was a connection, something linking the two events, but what exactly was happening, they still didn't know. As the weight of the captain's questions settled in, Amelia's mind raced. She tried to piece together the events of the last few hours, the strange orb, the way it had reacted to them, and now this field that was surrounding the ship. It wasn't just a natural phenomenon. This was deliberate. The orb had somehow triggered this, but why? What was it trying to do? What did it want? She forced herself to focus on the task at hand, looking to Carter for guidance. He had more experience with the ship's systems than anyone, but even he seemed taken aback by what was happening. Carter cleared his throat and stepped forward. "We might have an explanation," he said, his voice unusually serious. "But you're not going to like it." Amelia turned to him, her eyes narrowing. She could see that he wasn't joking, that whatever he was about to say was important. The captain's expression remained unchanged, but the tension in her posture told Amelia that she was ready for whatever Carter had to say. Amelia nodded for him to continue. "The orbs," Carter began, glancing at Amelia briefly before looking back at the captain. "The ones we found in the lab, they're not just weird alien artifacts. They're reacting to us, and I think they might be connected to this energy field. If I had to guess, they're the ones causing it. And that's not even the worst part." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected the orbs were somehow linked to the field, but hearing it confirmed sent a wave of dread washing over her. "If we don't figure out what they want or what they're doing, we're in serious trouble." Amelia felt a knot form in her stomach. She stepped forward, feeling the weight of the captain's gaze on her as she spoke. "The orbs are trying to communicate," she said, her voice steady despite the churn of anxiety in her chest. "They might not be hostile. This energy field could be some kind of signal or response to us, but we need more time to understand it." She hesitated, glancing at Carter, who was visibly uncomfortable with the situation but knew the urgency was undeniable. The ship's very survival could be at stake. Captain Torres's gaze didn't waver, her icy expression unchanging as she processed the information. "And what happens when this signal crushes the whole ship and turns us into space dust?" she asked, her voice sharp and skeptical. Amelia could feel the captain's doubt hanging in the air, but she was desperate to maintain some sense of control. "I don't think that's their intention," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "But I need more time to analyze them. We can't just act on instinct. We need data." Torres signed, her frustration palpable. "Time is a luxury we don't have," she said, her tone final. She turned to her crew, her expression grim as she sought their input. "Options?" she asked, clearly looking for a solution. "Any solution." The ship's tactical officer, Lieutenant Barlow, spoke up. "We could try to disrupt the field with an energy pulse," he suggested, his voice calm but with an edge of caution. "It's risky, but it's a shot." Amelia felt the weight of the decision hanging in the air. The risk was enormous, but without more information, it might be their only option. Yet, before they could delve deeper into the discussion, Carter's voice cut through the tension. "Or we could, not antagonize whatever is out there. We barely understand it," he muttered under his breath, clearly uneasy with the idea of taking aggressive action. Amelia stood quietly, considering Carter's suggestion. While the idea of not antagonizing whatever was out there was tempting, she knew that time was not on their side. The energy field surrounding the ship was expanding rapidly, and every second counted. The captain was right. They had no luxury of waiting. Amelia's mind raced, but she remained focused on the task at hand. If the orbs were trying to communicate, if they were indeed intelligent, then their first priority should be to understand the message, to understand what they were dealing with. A more aggressive response could trigger something far worse. Carter, noticing the hesitation in Amelia's eyes, shifted on his feet. "We could at least try talking to them," he said reluctantly, his voice softer than before. He had always been the practical one, the engineer who relied on technical knowledge to solve problems. But this was something different. This was alien. And even his confidence in mechanical solutions wasn't enough to overcome the uncertainty of the situation. Amelia nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. If they could communicate, there might be a way to resolve this peacefully. But the risk was still there. What if the orbs weren't as benign as they hoped? Amelia glanced at the captain, whose sharp eyes studied her closely, waiting for an answer. There was no room for hesitation now. "If they're trying to communicate, we need to respond," Amelia said, her voice firm. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment. They were on the edge of something monumental, something that could change the course of human understanding. But they needed to take the next step cautiously, intelligently. If they didn't act soon, the energy field would overwhelm them, and they might not have another chance. Captain Torres considered Amelia's words carefully. She didn't trust the orbs, but she didn't have the luxury of dismissing them either. "You have 1 hour," the captain said, her voice authoritative. "If this energy field gets any closer, we're going with the energy pulse. But until then, I want you both on this, understand it, and fast." Her tone left no room for argument. Amelia knew the captain's decision was as much about hope as it was about necessity. They had no choice but to try. Amelia turned to Carter, who was still clearly uneasy. "I'm going to need your help," she said, her voice low but resolute. Carter's eyebrows shot up in disbelief, but then he sighed and nodded. Despite his reluctance, he understood the importance of the task. He might not fully believe in the idea of peaceful communication with alien orbs, but he was an engineer. He solved problems. And right now, this was the biggest problem they had ever faced. The two of them headed back to the lab, where the orbs still hovered in the center of the room. Their synchronized pulses had slowed a bit, but the faint glow still danced across their translucent surfaces. Amelia could feel the air grow thick with anticipation as they approached the strange entities. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to proceed with care, but there was no time to hesitate. They had been given a chance, and she wasn't about to waste it. Amelia activated her data pad, bringing up the basic translation algorithm she had developed. The orbs had reacted to their presence before, and this time, she hoped the translation system would make sense of the patterns they had displayed. The pulses of light seemed to quicken again as she tapped a few commands into the pad. "Okay," she murmured, mostly to herself. "Let's see if we can make sense of this." She could feel Carter watching her, his skepticism palpable, but there was nothing left to do but try. The orbs had shown signs of intelligence. They had communicated with them once. It was time to see what else they had to say. As the data pad hummed to life, the orbs emitted a series of rapid pulses. Amelia watched the screen intently, her heart pounding as the symbols on her pad began to shift and rearrange. The first message appeared, clear and unmistakable. "We require assistance." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The orbs weren't just strange phenomena. They were intelligent beings, reaching out for help. Now the real question was, what kind of help did they need? Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she read the message on her data pad. "We require assistance." The words were simple, yet the gravity of their meaning weighed heavily on her. The orbs weren't just alien objects. They were asking for help, possibly in a way she couldn't fully comprehend. Her thoughts immediately turned to the reactor. Had the orbs somehow caused the malfunction, or were they aware of it? It seemed too coincidental that their appearance and the reactor's critical failure were so closely timed. She glanced at Carter, whose face had gone pale as he read the same message. "Assistance with what?" Carter muttered under his breath, still leaning over her shoulder. His eyes were glued to the screen, trying to make sense of the strange symbols that were now flickering on the datapad. Before Amelia could respond, another message appeared, one that made her blood run cold. "Your vessel is compromised. Reactor failure is imminent." It felt like a punch to the gut. The orbs had known about the reactor before they even discovered the problem. How? And what did they mean by compromised? Carter quickly pulled out his handheld terminal, tapping commands furiously as he accessed the ship systems. His face drained of color as the data began to update. "They're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Amelia could hear the sharp edge of panic in his tone. "The reactor's overheating. If we don't shut it down soon, it'll take the whole ship with it." Amelia's stomach twisted. She had feared it would come to this, but hearing it confirmed was a stark reminder of how close they were to disaster. Despite the urgency, Amelia's mind couldn't help but linger on the orbs. They had known about the reactor's failure before anyone on the crew did. It was as if they were aware of the Ecliptica's systems, as if they had some access to the ship's internal workings. But how? Were they connected to the ship's technology in some way? Or were they simply able to sense the impending danger through some other means? The questions multiplied, but there was no time to investigate further. The reactor had to be dealt with immediately. The orbs pulsed again, their glow intensifying. It was almost as if they were reacting to the mounting tension, aware of the urgency in the room. Another message appeared on Amelia's datapad. "We can assist. Permission required." The orbs were offering help. It wasn't much, but it was something. Amelia's heart raced as she looked at Carter. Their options were dwindling rapidly. They could try to solve the reactor problem on their own, but the orbs had already proven they knew more about the ship's state than anyone else. Was it possible they could help? Or was this another trick? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but there was no choice but to trust them. Amelia took a deep breath, her mind racing. She glanced at the orbs again, then at Carter, whose expression was a mixture of disbelief and reluctant acceptance. "Do we trust them?" he asked, his voice low. Amelia knew there were no guarantees, but they were running out of time. "Do we have a choice?" she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. Without further hesitation, she turned to the orbs and spoke aloud, giving them the permission they requested. Permission granted. As soon as Amelia gave her permission, the orbs pulsed in unison, their light growing brighter and more intense. The ship's lights flickered briefly, and a hum reverberated through the lab, making the hair on the back of Amelia's neck stand up. She felt a chill run down her spine as the room seemed to vibrate with energy. Carter stepped back, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Amelia didn't answer immediately, too focused on the orbs to respond. The energy in the room felt almost electric, as if the orbs were drawing on something deep within the ship's systems. Amelia watched the glowing spheres carefully, her thoughts racing. The orb closest to her pulsed more rapidly, almost as if it were communicating directly with her. The datapad in her hands began to process a series of new symbols, more complex than before, but still decipherable. She felt a flicker of hope. It was working. The orbs were responding to her, and their offer of assistance seemed genuine. She could almost sense their intelligence, quiet, patient, but undeniably powerful. She tapped a few more commands into her pad, trying to establish a clearer connection. The orbs seemed to understand, and they began to align themselves in a perfect pattern, forming a circle around her. As the circle of orbs stabilized, the humming sound grew louder, almost resonating in the very walls of the Ecliptica. It wasn't just noise, it felt like a signal, a vibration that she could almost feel in her bones. Then, suddenly, the orbs shifted, and a new message appeared on her datapad. This one was different, not just a request or statement, but something more profound. "We will stabilize the core." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. The orbs weren't just offering help. They were taking control. They had to know about the reactor's core, and they had the means to help. She didn't fully understand how, but she had to trust them. Carter's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are we sure we want them to mess with the core? What if this goes wrong?" His concern was valid. They didn't know what kind of technology the orbs possessed, nor did they fully understand their capabilities. But they had already proven to be more than just passive observers. Amelia met Carter's gaze and saw the same uncertainty mirrored in his eyes. They had no other choice. The reactor was already unstable, and if they didn't do something soon, it would be too late. The orbs had shown they could detect the failure, and if they were willing to help, this might be their only shot. Amelia hesitated for a fraction of a second before giving her answer. We don't have time to question it. If they can fix the reactor, we let them. Her words were calm, but the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. They had been through so much already, encountering the alien orbs, learning they were intelligent, and now, relying on them to stabilize the ship. It was a gamble, but Amelia knew it was the only option left. She took a deep breath and nodded at the orbs. Proceed, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. The moment she spoke, the orbs began to glow even brighter, their pulses now synchronized in a rhythmic pattern that seemed to sync with the heartbeat of the ship itself. Amelia could feel the energy shifting, like a wave crashing through the systems, traveling through the ship's core. It wasn't just an electrical signal. It felt like the orbs were connecting with the very essence of the Ecliptica, almost as if they were integrating with its systems. She glanced at her data pad and saw the reactor's status changing. The overheating status began to slowly reverse, the critical warnings fading into green. The reactor was stabilizing just as the orbs had promised. Carter looked at the screens in disbelief. "It's working," he murmured, unable to hide his astonishment. The numbers on the reactor status display were stabilizing, the temperature dropping steadily. The ship was being saved, thanks to the orbs. Amelia allowed herself a moment of relief, but it was fleeting. They had solved one problem, but they still didn't fully understand what the orbs were or why they were here. The connection between them and the ship was undeniable, but the implications were vast. They couldn't afford to ignore the bigger questions now. As the reactor returned to normal levels, the orb's glow began to soften. They had done what they promised, but it was clear that their role in this was far from over. Amelia's mind churned with the possibilities. What did the orbs want from them? What kind of technology were they capable of? And most importantly, what were the orbs going to do next? She glanced back at Carter, who was still staring at the screens in stunned silence. The danger had passed, for now, but Amelia knew this was just the beginning. The orbs had proven themselves to be both allies and mysteries, and the journey ahead would be one of discovery and uncertainty. The Ecliptica had been saved, but at what cost? And what did the orbs truly want from humanity? These were questions they would have to answer soon, as they now faced a new reality, one that was full of both promise and peril. Amelia could only hope that the orbs would continue to assist them, but deep down, she knew that this strange alliance would lead them into uncharted territory, where answers might come at a far greater price.